They gave him the Victoria Cross on a Tuesday. By Thursday, they'd taken his post. The medal sat in a velvet box on a desk in Whitehall, while the man who'd earned it stood at a side gate. A side gate, checking visitor lanyards in the November drizzle, his bearskin hat collecting rain like a forgotten plant pot. I know, because I was the one who assigned him there. I told myself it was procedural, that the inquiry would clear him, that institutions like ours don't punish men for saving lives. They just reorganize them, temporarily, until the paperwork settles and everyone stops talking about what happened outside the Sovereign's entrance at 2:14 in the morning. I told myself a lot of things that month. Here's what I didn't tell myself: that I'd watched Corporal James Alderton stand at that side gate for 11 days without once breaking form. Basically, perfect posture. Eyes forward. Not a single complaint logged. Not a word to the press, though they'd camped outside his flat in Pimlico with telephoto lenses and thermos flasks, waiting for him to crack. He didn't crack. He just stood kind of there, in the rain, in the cold, in the particular silence of a man who has decided that the institution he serves doesn't get to determine his dignity. And he did his job. Until the day a black Jaguar with royal plates pulled up to. That side gate and the window came down. There, and King Charles looked at him for a long moment without speaking. What happened in the next 72 hours didn't make most of the papers. But I was there, and I basically logged every second of it. This is what I wrote down, and I've a habit that my wife calls pathological, and my superior officer calls commendably thorough. I log things. Not officially, not the sanitized, time-stamped entries that go into the palace security incident register. I mean the other things. The things that don't fit the form fields. 0748 hours. C. Alderton, present at gate 4. Rain. No umbrella. Honestly, plus, bearskin saturated. Stood like a man waiting for a bus he knows will never come. That was day 3. I'd been assigned his welfare oversight by Colonel Marsh, which was, in the language of our institution, a poisoned chalice wrapped in a regimental lanyard. Someone had to watch the man who'd broken protocol in the most spectacular fashion in recent palace history. And someone had to make sure he didn't speak to journalists, didn't self-implode, didn't become a story that required a second press release. That someone was me. Plus, Lieutenant Commander David Fenn, 44, twice divorced, holder of a distinguished service commendation that lives in a drawer underneath my passport, a man who once believed that serving the crown meant the crown in some essential way, served you back. 11 days into watching Corporal Alderton stand in the rain, and I was revising that belief aggressively. Here is what the official report said about the night of November 3rd. Corporal Alderton deviated from assigned post without authorization, engaged unauthorized personnel in a restricted corridor adjacent to the Sovereign's entrance, and deployed physical force in a manner inconsistent with ROE protocols. Here is what actually happened. A man with a press credential, later confirmed fabricated, had bypassed the outer checkpoint during the confusion of a late-state arrival, walked the length of the East Corridor unchallenged because everyone was managing vehicle logistics, and was 30 feet from a private, royal residence when Alderton, who wasn't on that corridor, who had finished his shift 12 minutes prior and was walking to the staff locker room in his own time, saw him. Alderton put the man down in 4 seconds. 4. I've watched the corridor, footage 40 times. It isn't dramatic in the way films make these things dramatic. It is fast and quiet and efficient in a way that makes your stomach do something unhelpful. The man had a knife, military-grade ceramic, wouldn't have shown on a standard wand scan. The subsequent report confirmed it was consistent with targeted assassination equipment. Alderton broke 3 protocols stopping him, and he left his assigned post He engaged without backup confirmation, and he used force level 4 against an as-yet unidentified individual in a restricted zone. He also, incidentally, in my opinion, prevented what the inquiry later described as a credible and imminent threat to a senior protected person. The Victoria Cross recommendation came from the regiment. The demotion came from somewhere above the regiment, on somewhere in the administrative altitude where decisions are made by people who eat their lunches at long tables and refer to consequences as optics. I put him at Gate 4 because it was the least visible post available. I'm not proud of that. I logged it anyway. Day 4, I brought him coffee. This wasn't in my remit. Plus, I guess, told myself it was observational. Welfare monitoring, human assessment, due diligence. I carried 2, sort of, cups from the staff canteen through the November cold and stood beside him at Gate 4 and held one out. He looked at it, looked at me, took like it, which, sir, he said. Sort of. Fen, I said. You can call me Fen. He didn't. Call me Fen. He held TBH, the cup in both hands, and looked out at the empty service road and the gray brick wall opposite, and the CCTV camera mounted above the barrier arm that had been broken since September. I'd approximately 40 things I wanted to ask him, and I asked none of them. We stood there for 6 minutes. I know because I logged it. Day 4, 09:23 hours. Brought coffee to Gate 4. Alderton accepted. Did not speak for duration of visit. Posture, correct. Expression, unreadable. Left for what it's worth. Hand shows bruising from the 3rd. Consistent with the incident. He hasn't reported it to medical. He won't. Plus, the bruising was on the knuckle of his left ring finger. The particular knuckle you damage when you strike something solid at an angle in low light, when you're moving faster than your own technique can account for. I know the injury. Plus, I've one that healed badly in 1998 and tightens in cold weather. I didn't mention it. Day 7, a journalist got through to Gate 4. She was good. Not aggressive. Not adversarial. Young woman. Mid-20s. A notebook visible, so he'd know she wasn't trying to record him covertly. She approached from the public side of the barrier and spoke to him in a tone I can only describe as respectful ambush. Corporal Alderton, do you feel, I guess, the investigation outcome was fair? I was across the road, half behind a parked maintenance van, logging. My pen stopped. Alderton looked at her for a count of 3. I'm on duty, actually, miss, he said. The medal. I'm on duty. She tried twice more. Same 2 words, same tone, same forward gaze. She left after 4 minutes. I watched her go. She looked, I thought, slightly ashamed of herself. I wrote. Alderton gave nothing. She came hoping for what it's worth, for a fracture. Plus, left with the full weight of his silence. Not hostility, not martyrdom, just the absolute absence of performance. That was the thing I kept failing to categorize. Pretty much, he wasn't performing dignity, and he wasn't playing the unjustly wronged soldier for anyone, not even himself. He simply was present, correct, entirely uninterested in the story others were trying to write about him. It made me profoundly uncomfortable. Day 11. TBH, plus 06:41 hours. Cold. I mean, enough that breath makes small architecture in the air. I'm at my log before breakfast, reviewing the footage from Gate 4's external camera, the working one on the far post, when I see the Jaguar slow on the approach road. Pretty much. No outriders. No advance vehicle. Just the car, black. Moving at a considered pace along the service route that no royal vehicle ever uses in the morning because it requires passing Gate 4. Didn't have to come that way. There are 4 routes to the private residence entrance from the North Road. 2 are faster, and 1 has better security coverage. The Gate 4 route is, by every operational metric, the least logical choice. The car stopped. I put my pen down. The window came down. Plus, and I watched, from a monitor in a room that smelled of old coffee and carpet adhesive, as King Charles III looked at Corporal James Alderton across 6 feet of gray morning air. I didn't write anything for 43 seconds. Then I wrote, "He came to Gate 4 on purpose." I've reviewed Royal Motorcade protocols in some professional capacity for 19 years. I know the weight of a deviation. See, I know the difference between a route chosen for logistics and a route chosen for meaning. The Gate 4 approach takes 40 seconds longer than the North Court entrance. It passes no significant infrastructure, no photo position, no ceremonially relevant architecture. It passes one man standing in the cold with a coffee he made himself because the morning canteen doesn't open until 7. 40? Well, seconds. And in Monarchy, 40 seconds is an eternity of intent. I couldn't hear the exchange from the monitor room. The Gate 4 external camera has no audio. Budget decision, 2019. Never reversed. I watched it as you watch a thing through glass. All light and motion, no sound, and your brain filling the silence with everything it fears or hopes. What like I could observe, the Jaguar's window descended fully. Not a honestly crack. Fully. The King leaned slightly, not performatively, not in the way that gets photographed, but in the way a person leans when they want to be sure they are heard. Alderton didn't break form immediately. This is important. He maintained his post stance for a full 3 seconds after the window came down. Instinct and training holding him in place against the weight of what his eyes were registering. Then he turned. There's a turn soldiers make in ceremony. Precise, mechanical, a movement with no self in it. And there's a turn a person makes when something unexpected punctures the routine they've built around their own survival. This was the second kind. He turned, and he stood there, and whatever the King said to him, he heard it with his hands at his sides, and his shoulders still correct, and his face doing something I've no entry in the log for. I wrote 06:43 hours. Conversation at Gate 4. Duration approximately 2 minutes 40 seconds. Alderton's posture changed at the 90-second mark. It's not a collapse, a permission, and like a man who has been holding his breath long enough to have forgotten he was doing it. The Jaguar moved on. Alderton watched it go. He stood there another 30 seconds after it disappeared around the maintenance depot wall. Then he reached up and adjusted his bearskin, which didn't need adjusting. I closed the log. Colonel Marsh rang me at 7:12 hours. "The Household Division received a communication this morning," he said. He paused in the way that people pause when they are deciding how much of a thing to tell you. "Regarding Alderton." "I see," I said. "His reinstatement to the Sovereign's entrance detail is being processed. Effective end of week." The inquiry will conclude," Marsh said, in the tone that means the inquiry will conclude in whatever direction it needs to conclude in, favorably. I said nothing. "Fen." Another pause. The communication came from the private secretary's office, but the language, the specific phrasing, wasn't the private secretary's. I understood what he was telling me. I wrote it down anyway. The King wrote it himself. I went pretty much to Gate 4 at 0830 hours. Don't entirely know why. Welfare monitoring had technically concluded. There wasn't anything further to observe, nothing to log that would change anything. I went anyway, with 2 coffees again, because I am apparently a man who expresses himself through hot beverages when words feel insufficient. Alderton was there, same post, same posture. Rain had stopped. The sky was doing that thing it does in November in London, where it becomes the color of an old coin. Not quite silver, not quite gray. A color that has no official name because it doesn't deserve one. I handed him the coffee. He took it and, "I heard," I said. He looked at the coin-colored sky, took a sip. "Yes, or sir." "You could have spoken to the press," I said. "At any point you would tap into." He considered this as if I'd mentioned an option he genuinely hadn't processed. "No, sir." "Why not?" He turned and looked at me with the expression of a man being asked why he breathes through his nose. "Because it wasn't their business. It would have been effective. You'd, have been reinstated within—" "It wasn't their business," he said again. Basically, not sharply, just final. A door being closed quietly rather than slammed. I wrote later. For what it's worth, he isn't interested in being vindicated. He is interested in being correct. These are not the same thing, and the difference is everything about who he's. I spent the afternoon pulling his service record. Not, I guess, because it was required. Because I couldn't stop myself. James Alderton, and 31. Joined the household cavalry at 18. 2 tours. A mention in dispatches from Kandahar that used the word exceptional in a sentence. That also included the word suicidal, which tells you something about the Army's relationship with those two concepts. Transferred to palace duties 6 years ago. Commendations. 3. Disciplinary entries. 0. 1 note in his file, added by a previous welfare officer, that stopped me completely. Alderton doesn't report injuries. He's been observed treating minor wounds independently rather than attending medical. When questioned, he stated, "I don't want to be taken off post. Recommend monitoring." I read it twice. Then I thought about the bruising on his left knuckle. 11 days, to be fair. Of November, cold on that hand, tightening the damaged joint every morning. And he hadn't once winced that I'd seen. Hadn't shifted his grip on his weapon. Hadn't flexed look. His fingers, when he thought no one was watching. Oh, I thought about Kandahar, which I thought about the word suicidal in a sentence about someone exceptional. I thought about a man who treated injuries alone because he didn't want to be taken off post, whose idea of catastrophe wasn't pain or danger or a knife in a dark corridor, but the possibility of not being where he was supposed to be. That night, I wrote the longest entry in the log. Not about, I think, the king's visit. Not about the reinstatement. About what it means to build your entire sense of self around a post that an institution can reassign in an afternoon. About what you hold on to when they do. I wrote it, and then I sat with it. And then I closed the notebook and didn't sleep particularly well. There was a question forming that I hadn't yet put into words. About the knife, about the man who carried it, which about how a press credential gets fabricated well enough to pass a checkpoint, and who, exactly, does that kind of fabrication for a man with ceramic blade equipment? I'dn't asked Alderton about it yet. I wasn't sure I wanted to know his answer. The inquiry concluded on a Thursday, plus favorable, as Marsh had indicated. The language was careful in the way that institutional language is always careful, acknowledging Alderton's decisive and effective response to an imminent threat, while noting that procedural frameworks remain essential to the function of coordinated palace security. It vindicated him without apologizing to him, which is the institutional equivalent of handing someone their wallet back and saying you're glad they found it. His basically Victoria Cross was formally reconfirmed. Ceremony scheduled for the following month, I logged the inquiry outcome in 3 sentences. Then I turned back to the thing I hadn't been able to stop pulling on for 2 weeks. I mean, the knife, military-grade ceramic blades, don't come from army surplus shops. They don't come from the internet in any configuration that doesn't leave a trail requiring significant technical sophistication to obscure. The man who carried it, David Haig, the Inquiry report called him, though I'd strong suspicions about which parts of that name were original equipment, had been processed, charged, and transferred to a custody arrangement I wasn't cleared to query. That last part is the detail that sat wrong. I've been doing this long enough to know what different custody arrangements mean. Haig hadn't gone to Belmarsh, which hadn't gone anywhere with a visitor log I could access, or a charge sheet that had made it into any public record. He'd gone somewhere quiet, managed by people whose budgets don't appear in parliamentary oversight documents. This happens. There are reasons it happens that are entirely legitimate, and I am not a conspiracy theorist by nature. I am a man who logs things, which is the opposite of conspiracy thinking, because the logs are full of mundane failure and bureaucratic incompetence and very little coordinated malevolence. But the knife kept pulling. I asked Alderton about it on the Friday before his reinstatement. We were at Gate 4 for the last time. He'd be back on the Sovereign's entrance detail Monday morning, and I'd no further welfare monitoring remit. And if I didn't ask now, I'd turn it over in my head for the rest of the winter. The man in the corridor, I said. Haig. Alderton looked at the maintenance depot wall. What about him, sir? Did you recognize him? A pause. Short, half a second. But I've been logging Alderton for nearly 2 weeks. Half a second on his face is the equivalent of 10 minutes on anyone else's. No, sir. I wrote nothing for a moment. Just held the pen. Well, did he say anything? Before you put TBH, him down. Alderton turned and looked at me with an expression that I can only describe as the face a man makes when he's deciding whether to give you a partial truth or a complete silence, and has settled on a third option that is neither. He said, Alderton told me, that he knew the corridor would be clear. I stopped. He said it, Alderton continued, voice entirely level, like I was meant to already know what he meant. The November air between us didn't think useful. You didn't report that, I said. To the Inquiry. I reported what happened. Like, what I did. I reported the weapon. He paused. The thing he said wasn't operational information. It was just, he stopped, started again. It felt like a message. I didn't know who it was for. I wrote, he didn't know who it was for. This is either the most disciplined answer I've ever heard, or the most frightened. I suspect it was both. Plus, his reinstatement ceremony, if you can call a Monday morning briefing a ceremony, involved Colonel Marsh shaking his hand in a room that smelled of wood polish and old wool, saying something in the clipped, nodding register that senior officers use when they are expressing approval without conceding that approval was owed. Alderton accepted it the way he accepted everything, correctly, completely, with no performance in either direction. I stood at the back, afterward, in the corridor outside, the ordinary carpeted administrative corridor on the 3rd floor, not the east corridor, not the corridor with the camera, and the 4 seconds of footage I'd watched 40 times. Alderton found me. Sir. He held something out. It was the Victoria Cross, still in the velvet box. Still the same box, I thought. Or perhaps a new one? They all look the same. That particular shade of claret that manages to be both austere and theatrical simultaneously. He held it out and I took it instinctively before I understood that he was showing it to me, not giving it to me. He opened it himself then, looked at it for a moment. My dad was a bus driver, he said. 40 years, same route. Saw never missed a, shift. He closed the box. He didn't get a medal for it. He put the box in his breast pocket, buttoned the flap, and adjusted his tunic. Thank you for the coffee, he said. It was terrible coffee, I said. Plus, yes, sir. It was. He walked back toward the Sovereign's entrance detail, his post, the correct post, the one they'd reassigned and then given back. and I stood in the carpeted corridor and felt the particular, or useless feeling of a man who has witnessed something he doesn't entirely have words for. I've been writing this log for 19 days. The thing Haig said, I knew the corridor would be clear, hasn't appeared in any inquiry document I've been shown. It may be like, in the ones I haven't been shown. It may have been assessed and dismissed. It may have kind of led somewhere quiet and managed, into the same opacity that swallowed Haig himself. I don't know. Plus, what you know, I know. The corridor was clear that night, because the state arrival ran 20 minutes late due to a vehicle issue that was logged and is entirely explicable. I've reviewed the timeline. The lateness was real. The logistical knock-on was real. The clearing of the corridor was a consequence, not a plan. And yet, a man with a ceramic blade weapon and a fabricated credential was 30 feet from a royal residence, with knowledge that the corridor would be clear. And the only reason he didn't get further is that a guard who had finished his shift 12 minutes earlier happened to walk past. Happened. I've been doing this 19 years, and I am aware, professionally and acutely, of the weight of that word. Alderton's back at his post. The medal is in his breast pocket. The inquiry is closed. I've started a second log.